Hello, everyone. Good evening,
Hello.
good
Good evening.
afternoon, good morning. I'm Priscilla. I'm here with Barbara and Juan, and we are starting another session, another webinar of our Young Learners Week. And I hope you're all enjoying this week with a lot of webinars, a lot of sharing, and a lot of learning happening.
Thank you.
So tonight we have Juan, and he's going to talk about he's going to explore some principles of classroom routine and discuss practical ideas that can make any young learner's teacher's life easier. So what is that you crave? CRAVE, crave as young learner's teacher. And Barbara, can you talk a little about who Juan is?
Yes, hello everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to our BrELT Young Learner Teen Week. Juan Reis Lopes is a teacher and teacher trainer at Cultura Inglesa São Paulo, where he also works as a CELTP and CELTAS tutor. He graduated in English Language and Literature from SBie and holds the CELTA and the ICELT. He also holds an Emotional Intelligence Specialist Certificate from SBie and is a social psychology enthusiast. So over to you, Juan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for the webinar. I know it's a holiday in São Paulo, where especially to those who are joining me on a holiday, I know how much of an effort you're making. Let me just share my screen here, and there we go. So what is it that you crave as a young learner's teacher, right? First of all, we're going to start by talking about what we're going to cover in this webinar. So what are we getting to? We're going to talk about the reasons why teachers might feel stressed. We're also going to talk about principles that can help reduce stress. So that's what the acronym will stand for. So what are the 5 principles that we can look at when we're feeling too stressful teaching young learners? And finally, we're going to look at some practical ideas that might help us use the C.R.A.V.E. Principles, these 5 principles. So what is it that makes teaching young learners so stressful to some of us? I would like to invite you to reflect upon it first. You don't have to give me an answer right now. You don't actually have to have any answers to the questions I'm going to pose, but this is really just to provoke some thinking. Why is it that we find young learners, the young learner classroom, a stressful situation, and what are the challenges that we face when we're teaching them? So hopefully throughout this webinar, we're going to be learning what makes it stressful and how we can turn that around, how we can make it more fun and enjoyable for all of the people involved. So first of all, why are teachers stressed? I think it's a given in our community that teaching is, by default, a stressful profession. But what does research say about it? First of all, we have poor motivation in pupils. This is something that tends to stress us very much. Also in discipline and time pressures. And these are, I think, the 3 most relevant reasons why we feel stressed inside our classroom. And besides all of these 3, which are what we're going to cover today, there's also working conditions, low status, and conflicts with colleagues. And this is not me saying, this is research, as you can see here in the sources, that has been carried out throughout many years, and that has sort of shown how what kind of situations teachers face in their jobs nowadays. Apart from that, England's Safety and Health Executive has also issued sort of a warning in 2011, very recently, saying that many teachers have actually been seeking psychiatric help. What is going on with our profession, right? I would like to start by saying that it's not my intention to show solutions to all of this. It's really not the idea. I think that the main purpose to make this webinar happen is actually to shed some light on a few of the things that we can do that are in our power to actually deal with these reasons why we feel stressed. So as I said, we're going to be focusing on the three first reasons why we're stressed. And one possible solution among many, and I'd like to remind you, among many possible solutions is classroom routine. This is something I've been exploring for a while now as a teacher and a teacher trainer, and I decided to share some of the ideas that I've had throughout this year's teaching and training other teachers, because I think they can be very valuable. But what exactly is classroom routine? So according to Fred Jones, it's a well-rehearsed response to a teacher's directive. So it means that whatever it is that the teacher says students will do, students will be ready to respond to it. Not because they are necessarily consciously thinking about that, but because the response has been rehearsed so many times that it's just instinctive of students to do it. It's also one of a teacher's primary, sorry for this misspelling here, labor-saving devices. And we should bear in mind that classroom routines are not for free. They are not simply to be announced, they must be taught and practiced. And I think this is where our mistake lies. I think this is where we sort of slip a little bit, because I think we take for granted the amount of effort that it takes to establish classroom routine. And we also take for granted the amount of help that classroom routines, well-established classroom routines, can be in our jobs. And as Fred Jones said, they must be taught and practiced. So once we teach classroom routines, we must go over and over again through these classroom practices and classroom routines so that they will actually, stay. You can find more about it in Fred Jones' book, as I refer to it here. And what are the principles of classroom routine then? I've come up with 5 principles that I could sort of summarize in this acronym C.R.A.V.E, which is, I think, something that we all do. We sort of crave for something that can help us go through this whole situation of teaching young learners. And C.R.A.V.E stands for these here. It stands for consistency, responsibility, adaptability, variety, and finally, energy. I think that if you take these 5 principles, and again, I'd like to emphasize the fact that they're principles. These are not, and they're not intended to be a recipe for us to follow. These are principles for us to bear in mind when making decisions. The idea here is that we take these 5 principles and apply them to our own context in a way that makes more sense to our learners. So maybe consistency, responsibility, and adaptability make a lot of sense, but variety and energy don't in your own context. So what I'm inviting us to do is that we look at these principles and that we think of how they might be helpful in the context in which we teach and how they can be developed. So once you take consistency, for example, and learn how to do it, how can you make it even better? Or how can you teach other people to use consistency in their own lessons? By the end of this webinar, I hope that we have some practical ideas of how to use these and that we can, well, be maybe better equipped to share these ideas that we have. So what are these principles? Let's get to them. The first one is consistency. So why should we add consistency to our lessons? Well, consistency will be what helps establish rules of behavior. So the more you emphasize and the more you reinforce that a certain rule of behavior is to be followed, the easier it gets. So basically, really what I'm saying is that we make procedures familiar to students. The idea is that they know what is expected of them, not because we're telling them, but because we've been doing it for so long, and in every single lesson, the same thing will happen the same way. So that's the idea. The idea of making procedures familiar so that they will feel actually less anxious about them. In fact, research says that making procedures familiar in the young learner classroom is what settles them down. It's what helps them make a transition from the outside world to the classroom in a way that is less anxious for them. And one thing that is really important related to consistency is that we plan it, implement it, and reinforce it. So the idea is not that you just one day decide to do something and then the other day decide to do something else. Whatever consistent action you decide to implement, you have to reinforce it. And the idea is that you use it in every single lesson, so that on the day you don't use it, students will go and say, teacher, aren't we supposed to do this actually? But how? How can we do that? I think that in many schools that teach young learners, we already have some things going on. And in Cultura Inglesa São Paulo, for example, we also have some of the established procedures that we suggest teachers follow, so that we have consistent classroom routine. But here are some tips. We can associate moments in the lesson with the behavior. So for example, let's say that you're having trouble with learners who ask you to go to the toilet all the time. So associating the beginning of the lesson with going to the toilet might be one of the keys to solve that issue. So for example, before students even enter the classroom, what you can do is just tell them, guys, it's toilet and water time. So you're going to have 2 minutes to go drink some water, go to the toilet, and then come back and be ready to work. Because during the lesson, there will be no moments that you will associate with going to the toilet and drinking water, for example. But they know that before the lesson they can do it, and maybe after the lesson they can also do it. The more you emphasize that, the easier it gets to control the amount of students who will ask you to leave the classroom. Because unfortunately, sometimes what students are actually seeking to do is not really go to the toilet and drink water, but actually have some free time from the lesson for whatever reasons. Another behavior we can associate with certain moments in the lesson, for example, is preparing their materials. So as soon as they enter the classroom, you can have maybe on the board the materials that you're going to use, and then tell them, guys, these are the materials of the day. So you're supposed to just sit down and get your materials, and then we're going to be ready to work. And of course, it takes a lot of effort in the beginning because students are not used to it. It's not established yet. It's not a routine yet. So you have to sort of put in extra work in the very first weeks of the term so that students will learn what it's like to start the lesson with you. Another thing you can do is use chants and gestures. I think it's just a brilliant thing that many teachers have been doing for a lot of time, but that can be used in a more conscious way. So take, for example, circle time, which is something that happens in many young learner lessons. If you want students to sit in a circle, maybe you can have a song to indicate to everyone that they're actually supposed to go and sit in a circle. It can be a very simple chant, just something that students can very easily memorize and maybe even sing with you while you ask everyone to come join you. I don't know, for example, one of the things I used to do is make a circle, big and round, which is very common. And then students would know that they're supposed to come and make a circle. Again, it'll take time for students to actually get used to it, but it might happen within a week or two. And finally, use it every day. The idea is that whatever chant, gesture, or behavior that you're trying to reinforce with students is used in every single lesson. You cannot miss any of the lessons. Consistency, this is the true concept of consistency, actually. Another thing is that, for example, when dealing with indiscipline, is that you deal with indiscipline always the same way. So is it, I'm going to call the student and talk to him or her individually? Or is it, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to call their mother or call their father? Whatever it is, just make sure that you use it consistently. The idea is that you never miss a day, and that students one day get to the moment in which they will say, aren't we supposed to do this, teacher? Or where are the classroom, the materials of the day on the board? You know, they will be so familiar with that it will be second nature. The second part of the acronym is responsibility. So why should we add responsibility to our lessons? First of all, there's social responsibility. Students are learning to be human beings at the age in which they're considered to be young learners. I mean, they're not just our students, they're not just learning English, but they're actually learning to interact with other people. And much as a technical view of our profession will say we are not, I believe we are responsible for helping these students become better human beings, better at social situations. We're not aiming at having people who will be socially awkward or will do things that are not acceptable, socially speaking. So I think this is one of the main reasons why we should add responsibility to our list. Second thing is autonomy. We have to teach learners that they're also responsible for their own learner and that they have to develop this autonomy in themselves. And we can scaffold that way, to autonomous learning. I think it's part of our job to also teach them how to behave in a way that will be more beneficial to their own learning. Moral values. So of course, we are also talking about children who might not have developed this sense of otherness and this sense of working and behaving in a community. And finally, conflict resolution. I think it's a well-known fact to all of us that we are going to face conflict throughout our lives, and it is what we learn. It is what we learn with taking accountability for our actions that can help us resolve conflicts more efficiently when we become teenagers or adults. But how can we do that? I think try to do is just build rules together. I think one of the most beneficial things to do is you spot the problems that have been happening in the first week, and then you come and have a very honest conversation with your learner and I think these are not okay, and I would like to know, do you think they're okay? Or if you think they're not okay, then what can we do? You all agree you shouldn't be doing. You do. You can actually get to build rules for yourself with your students. So maybe students don't like it when you show them, I don't know, Peppa Pig snippets. Maybe they feel like they're too old for that already. And it's important that they will have some voice when you're building. I think it's important to discuss behavior and revise rules. So whatever behaves is sort of stepping out in this case, rules. Do you think we should revisit the rules to make them, I don't know, different so that they will actually be working for all of us? I think this often causes students to reflect on their own actions and go like, well, actually, I don't know. There are some children who will take other children's things when they need it. So I need the blue pencil, so I'll just go and get it because my friend. And if there's a rule that says that you should ask for things before you actually take them, and I disrespect it, maybe rethinking and going through the process of understanding that I don't want that to happen to me, so probably I shouldn't be doing this to other people. Helping children go through this process can be very beneficial, and it'll foster their sense of responsibility. The third concept that we have in the C.R.A.V.E. acronym is adaptability. So why should we include adaptability in our plan? So first of all, classroom routine is not meant to be rigid and fixed. Much as we've been talking about how these rules are very important and how much we should make sure to reinforce it and make sure students learn it, the idea is that we are also able to flexibilize and adapt these rules and the routine that we establish to what we actually see happening in the classroom. There's what Jim Scrivener said in his book, Learning Teaching, teach the learners, not the plan. So if your plan is to establish a certain classroom routine, or if your plan is to reinforce a certain classroom routine, but just doesn't fit the learners, then at what might work best for your learners. Remember to take students' needs, students' wants, and even their mood into account. There will be days in which, let's say, you have established that, let's imagine you have established that every day when they arrive, they will sing a hello song. And the idea of the hello song is that they will be practicing greetings. And that's why you have established that routine. And every day, students come and participate. But one day, maybe students, I don't know, are feeling too cold or they're too late to do it. I think it's okay to respect their mood in that sense. I think we often forget young learners are human beings just as much as we are, and they have feelings, and they have bad days, and they have good days, and they have days in which they're just not into participating in a lesson, and it's okay. I think we have to remember that it's okay. I think we have the feeling of just not wanting to do something negotiated. So, okay, you're not in the mood to do the hello song today. I think that we agree. Maybe we should think of something for today. Maybe we should, I don't know, agree that you don't participate in it today, but next class you commit to participating even that sometimes are in a bad day, but you still have some sort of respect in the previous part, in the previous also have to understand, and they have to see important is to be attentive to how your students' mood. So, or two is student who's happier than he usually is. I think it's worth treating them as someone who has something to make. This one student wanted sharing throughout the lesson, and I think this is very complicated for some teachers. I think that he needy the children who are sometimes annoying. They're like, oh, but they're always calling my name to attend. I tried to see what it was that he was trying to get from
Hi. It seems that Juan's internet just
Hello.
disconnected. We're trying to
I think
reach him back.
yeah, I think his internet connection just stopped
did
working or something.
with his parents. Maybe that's what
He's coming
happened.
back. Juan,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. What happened?
Your internet seemed to disconnect and you just got back to the talk. So can you come back a little bit?
Yes. Can you tell me where it stopped?
If you show me the slide, I can tell you.
Okay, let me share my screen.
It started sounding funny to me, like in cuts. I first thought it was my internet connection. Then everybody on YouTube said it was sounding funny for them as well.
Okay. it working out?
Yes, now I can see it, but this first how part, I think I totally missed it because it was cutting in pieces. So if you can,
Okay.
yeah, great.
Absolutely. I'll take it from here. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So what I was saying is that we have to be attentive to our students' moods. I think it's really important that we pay attention to that quiet student. If he's not usually quiet, then what happened to him or to her today? I think it's worth investigating what our students are feeling and what makes them feel like that. One of the things that I think we can do is pay attention to their usual behavior. So if you have a student who's usually very participative and today he doesn't want to participate, it's worth investigating what happened and really treating him as a human being. Like, is everything okay with you? Because you normally do this, and today I noticed that you didn't want to do it. Is there something you want to talk to me about? And then based on that, adapt your lesson plan. I think it's really worth it it's really worth spending time doing that. I think students will start seeing you as a person they can rely on. And also they'll see you as a person who respects them. So for example, let's say every single day you've decided they'll do a hello song and they're all on board. They like doing the hello song and they like dancing to it. They've even created a choreography maybe. But there's this one day when they're too tired or it's too cold and they're feeling sleepy. If they don't feel like singing a hello song and dancing to it, I think it's worth negotiating. So, okay, I see you're not very excited today. What would you like to do instead of doing the hello song? Or maybe, how about we do the hello song in different tones of voice and do something different that will actually embrace their mood and embrace the feelings that they're having right now. Because I think we tend to forget the children have just as many feelings as we do. And the difference is that they don't know how to name them. They don't know how to spot exactly what's causing them that feeling. And then they'll behave in the only ways they know how to behave. So for example, I know that something is annoying me. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that something is annoying me. And when I'm annoyed, I cry. This is what they'll do. And it's worth investigating and then trying to spot patterns. So whenever Eduardo is sad because something happened, he doesn't like to participate. Or whenever, I don't know, Maria is angry, she tends to come across as a little bit aggressive to her peers. The more you identify these patterns, the easier it will get to adapt your lesson to embrace these different moods and the feelings that they have. Also, be ready for changes. I think it's always worth having a plan B. Whatever activity you decide to do, think of a plan B. So what if my students are just lazy today? What if my students are just too tired to run? What if they just don't want to draw? What am I going to do? I think it's really essential that we're ready for that. And listen and talk to your students. Remember, treat them as people, treat them as human beings who are capable of thinking. I think it's worth sitting down with them and going like, are you feeling angry? Because when I feel angry, I usually tend to do this and this and this. Is this what you want to do right now? Yeah, okay, so maybe you're angry. Help them identify the kind of feelings that they're having and then act upon it. Act based on knowledge that you have gathered of their feelings and of their behavior. The next point in our acronym would be variety. I think all of you might have already predicted it, but the main reason why we should add variety is that predictability might make room for boredom, and we don't want our lessons to be boring in the sense that of not having an engaging lesson to our learners. If we have established a routine that actually gets predictable for learners, then I think we might fall for that trap. I think students will know that right after, I don't know, the hello song, there is book time, and right after book time, there is circle time, and right after circle time, there is a song, and then after the song, we leave. I think this is not what we want our students to do. I think we have to make sure that we decide what we will vary and what we will not vary. So for example, for me as a teacher, it's really important that students don't leave the room while I'm teaching. I mean, I have a 50-minute lesson from which I can actually only teach 35 minutes. So I'm not wasting any of my time talking to students and convincing them not to go to the toilet. So this is something I won't vary. I'm going to establish that before the lesson and right after the lesson, they're allowed to go to the toilet and drink some water. But within the lesson, this is not something that they can do. This is a rule that I'm not willing to vary. But I don't know, starting with a hello song? Maybe not. Maybe I can start with a drawing. Maybe I can start with whatever, a game or something else. Another thing that we should think about when we think of variety is we have to challenge our students. This is key to what we do. I think it's really important that we make them really think. If they know that right after the book activity, there will be a song based on the things they learned from the book, I think it won't be challenging at all. I think we have to add a mystery to the classroom routine that we established. And I think this is only one of the things that we can challenge our students with. Another thing, and this is something I've been talking to some of my coaches and mentees about, and some of my peers as well, is that we under-challenge our students when it comes to their linguistic production and the amount of linguistic production that we demand of them. I mean, I do understand that we are not supposed to expect young learners to be producing C2 level of English, but we are supposed to expose them to this kind of English. I think it's key that we understand that we are going to scaffold everything that we can so that our students are successful and at the same challenged, but that language is not under negotiation. I think this is something we do not negotiate. You don't go and make what you say wrong just so that students will understand you. So for example, if I'm, I don't know, let's say giving instructions to my learners, it's not okay for me to go and say, understand? Because I think understand might not be exactly the kind of language that we should be exposing students to. Maybe we can vary the ways in which we check their understanding, for example. So instead of going for understand, you can go for, do you get me? Do you get it? Is that okay for you? These kind of things. I mean, maybe these are not even the best questions to ask them at all, but the idea I think you get is that we have to vary our classroom routine as much as we vary the language exposure that we put our students to. And how can we do that? I think, again, as I said, decide what you will change and what you will keep. That is the very first thing you do. So what is it that you're going to prioritize? So I know that my students have to leave the room and I need to check that they have learned something. So at the end of every single lesson, I will check what they have learned. Maybe I would check it in the same way every single day. So one of the procedures that you can do, for example, is including a password moment. For them to leave the room, they have to say something that they learned today. So maybe they have to repeat a chunk. Maybe they have to answer they have to answer a question. Maybe they have to recognize something in an image. This is going to be their passwords. They cannot leave if they haven't guessed this word. Maybe what I can do, instead of making them stand in line and just ask them questions one by one, is I create some sort of challenge. Maybe I can add one of the chunks that I'm going to teach. I can write it down and then put it in an envelope. And then at the end of every lesson, I go and say, guys, this is the secret word. This is something we learned today. And I want to see who's able to guess what I have in the envelope. And then they'll all be trying to guess what's in the envelope. And they have to remember what they learned in the lesson and tell you what they remember so that they can try to guess. And then you go and reveal it. Oh, yes, it's monkey. I don't know. We were learning animals and they guessed it was a monkey. So again, I decided to keep the fact that they'll be doing something so that I can check their learning, but I changed the way that I did it. And I think this is the kind of variety we should be looking at. And always involve students. It's key that we investigate. I think I'm going to use that word again, investigate what our learners want. So Guys, what kind of games do you like to play? So maybe they like to play with technology, but maybe they don't like to play with technology at all. And we go and add, I don't know, computer games as if it were the most amazing thing. If it's not the kind of thing that will actually engage students, is it good variety that we are adding? So I think the answer to that question is no, just so you know. And I think this is why it's important that we involve our students. It's important that we know what they will actually find new and engaging. If you ask me, I'm a huge fan of paper. I like using a lot of paper in my classroom, and I like bringing activity to learners that will make them move around and actually deal with, concrete things. And I find this very engaging for my learners. And I found out that I wasn't doing that consciously at first, of course, but nowadays I think I kind of am. I found out that they were so exposed to technology outside the classroom. Like they play with their tablets all the time. And whenever they're trying to do something with their parents and their parents are busy, their parents will sometimes give them, I don't know, a cell phone to do something, or they'll just say, okay, go play with your computer for a while. They're just so exposed to technology outside the classroom that whenever I would bring, I don't know, Realia, this would be the most amazing thing for my learners. So again, in this technological era, maybe what we do in our classroom has to be exactly the opposite. And we will only know that if you involve your students. So ask them, do you often play with your tablet? Yes. Do you like to play with your tablet? Yes. Do you want to play with your tablet, I don't know, here in the school sometimes? Yes. Great. Okay. So let's have an activity that involves playing with your tablet. The final thing, the last part of the acronym is something many of you might have already guessed was coming, or many of you might already know that is extremely necessary when dealing with young learners, and that is energy. Much as many employers will make us teachers, especially novice teachers, I would say, believe that teaching young learners is actually easier and that it demands less energy and less preparation. Much as they will say this is not true. I think teaching young learners, this demands just as much energy, if not more energy, than teaching teenagers and adults. I think we have to understand a universe of things that we are often not in touch with. And that's why it demands a lot of energy. So I think one of the things that we have to remember when we're exploring the energy factor is spending energy is inescapable. This is something you will do. You will have to spend energy planning your lessons, and you will spend a lot of energy teaching them, and you will spend a lot of energy reflecting upon your lesson and thinking back and reflecting upon what went wrong and what you could differently, and going over 57 different attempts to solve a problem and you just haven't solved it yet. It demands a lot of time and energy. But we have to aim for a smarter, not bigger effort. I think this is one of the most essential lessons we have to learn about teaching young learners. Aim for a smarter, not bigger effort. Because if we're spending so much energy trying to control our learners, for example, when they are, I don't know, laughing at silly things, are we even spending our energy on something that is actually possible to solve? I mean, should we be trying to solve that? Children will laugh at silly things. Children will throw themselves on the floor and pretend that they're a fish. They will pretend that they're someone else. They will talk to you as if you were part of the role play. And I think it's important that we direct our energy not to making them stop doing it, but maybe direct our energy to making it valuable to our lessons. And when we do that, I think then we're making a smarter effort. And then it doesn't get, not that it doesn't get tiring, it will be tiring. You will be exhausted at the end of the lesson, but it will pay off. I think it pays off a lot better, by the way, than trying to make them stop doing what they're doing. And finally, focus on what really matters. I always remember this example when I'm talking to some of my peers about this aspect of focusing our energy on what really matters. There was a day in which I told students to copy something from the board. And I was finishing writing what was on the board, and I just started hearing some students talking to each other. And my first impulse was to just turn around and say, guys, you shouldn't be talking. This is the moment to copy. Just focus on copying it, you know. But I just took a while, took a second, took a deep breath, and I just, instead of turning around to yell at my students, I just turned around to check if they were copying, because my focus was that they copied what was on the board, not that they were silent. You see, there is a huge difference, because when I turned and I saw them actually copying things while talking, then it was okay. It was okay because I didn't want them to be silent. I wanted them to copy things. And if copying things involved talking to each other a little bit, but I was still getting what I wanted to get from them, that was okay. So this is one of the things to bear in mind. Keep your true objective in mind. You should remember what you actually want students to do in each of the stages of your lesson, so that what you're doing doesn't get, I don't know, tarnished by the other behavior the students will have. Because sometimes you want them to draw the animals that they learned so that they will play a game later. And they're drawing and, I don't know, standing up and doing something else, but they're still drawing. If that is your objective, that's okay. Children will be children. I think this is something to remember. And I think this is actually one of the motives we should have as young learner teachers. Children will be children. So remember what you actually want to get from that activity or from that stage of the lesson. Get it, make sure you get it, and just never mind about all the rest, unless, of course, it gets in the way of other things you also want to get. And make concessions. Remember that there will be exceptions. There will be moments in which you just go like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe you shouldn't actually be focusing on this at all. Maybe this shouldn't be the objective of this moment at all. And make concessions. Change what you're teaching, change what you're doing, so that it will be comfortable for everybody, both your learners and yourself. I don't know, let's say they have to read a text, but they just won't focus. They just won't focus. They just won't be silent, and students will be standing up all the time. Maybe instead of that, you can just go and play a game that will involve the same, that will achieve the same objective you had before, and you leave the reading for another moment. Again, aim for a smarter, not bigger effort. This should keep you a little bit less stressed in every young learner's lesson. My final question to you is, what are you taking from this webinar? I mean, we've covered all of the 5 principles that are consistency, responsibility, adaptability, variety, and energy. And these are some of the 5 key things that we should be doing and focusing on when we're planning and delivering our young learners lessons. Hopefully you've identified a few things that you can actually try and implement to your own lessons. And that's my question to you then. What are you taking from this webinar? If you do learn something, make sure you replicate it. Make sure you tell other people. Make sure you try new things. Make sure you don't stop at the C.R.A.V.E. Maybe you find an F somewhere, and maybe you find an, I don't know, another V for the acronym. Keep adding things to it. Make sure that your practice reflects, your principles reflect your practice. And this is what we've covered in this webinar. We covered reasons why teachers might feel stressed and some of the principles that can help us reduce the amount of stress teachers feel, especially young learners teachers, and some ideas on how to use these 5 C.R.A.V.E. principles. Thank you very, very, very much, and go figure it out. What is it that you crave as a young learner's teacher? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That was very inspiring. I think that as young learner teachers, we end up taking routine as something negative sometimes. So I think the C.R.A.V.E. idea will refresh lots of my principles in class.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions from people from YouTube.
Okay.
The first one is Lu Badra. She's asking, do you think language schools have appropriate classroom environments for young learners? I'm talking about the environment as 3rd grade teacher.
No, I don't think so. I think some English language centers will try to do their best when it comes to providing learners with a better environment that will be conducive to learning. But I think that given the circumstances, because we have so many language centers that will cater for both young learners and also teenagers, or maybe even adults as well, there's not enough space sometimes for us to actually have a place in which we will, have this perfect environment for children. I think that because of that, we might not be able to actually achieve very high standards when it comes to teaching young learners very often. In many companies, at least, that I have worked with, I haven't found the perfect environment always. But I think we can do our best with what we have. And actually, there's two perspectives that we should be taking into account. There's situational and dispositional. So whatever is dispositional is something that cannot be changed. It is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. And whatever is situational is actually things that will depend on circumstances. And I think that if you have a classroom environment, and I mean like the space, the physical space, that cannot be changed, this is dispositional. And once we take that for what it is, dispositional, then we shouldn't feel stressed about it. There's nothing we can do to change it. So we work on what we can change. We work on the situational thing.
That's very practical, like being choosing the smarter things to worry about. We also have Yanni. She's saying, I'd like to know how to keep a whole class speaking to students in English, but facing those typical complaints. What? Speaking Portuguese? I can't understand.
I think we go back to consistency, the very first principle. I think when it comes to students' language production, consistency is also key. I think we have to find ways to make the environment, the whole thing that happens in the classroom, be conducive to students producing English. And we should be very patient when it comes to that, because in the beginning, it might be a shock. Students will not want to speak another language because it's uncomfortable. I mean, for those of us who are learning another language, you might recall the moments in which you actually want to say something and you really, really want to communicate, but you just can't. So you just resort to your own language and you just give up on speaking the other language. And I think this is what young learners might not be able to do yet, and teenagers as well. They just can't deal with the frustration of not being able to communicate, and they really want to speak. They love speaking to us, right? So I think what we can do is little by little build this environment in which students will feel more comfortable to speak English. Some of the practical ideas we can do is, first of all, praise students whenever they use English. I think the more positive reinforcement they get from attitudes that will be conducive to them speaking English, the better it would be for them. The easier it would be for them to recognize the benefit of doing it. Another thing, scaffold. Scaffold as much as you can. So whenever you play a game, teach them the expressions to talk to each other during the game. So it's my turn now. Now it's your turn. Are you sure? I won. I lost. Oh my God, I can't believe. These kind of chunks that will actually be used during the game, so that they at least have a chance to say a few things in English and little by little automatize them. And finally, I think we cannot give up on that. There's something I read once, I can't remember who said it, but the author said, students will do whatever they can get away with. So you let them get away with speaking Portuguese once, they'll do it again and again and again. You let them get away with, I don't know, not doing their homework, they'll do it again and again and again. So the idea of consistency is that we don't let them get away with it. And little by little, we change their attitude and their behavior. Not saying this is 100% perfect, but it might be a beginning.
True, yes. Fabiana Moliterno is saying, I've been using Classroom Routine for some time now, and I know it works, but every time I try to set a number of procedures with them, I fear I am asking too much. Do you think there is an appropriate number of procedures we can set with students without making it overwhelming for them?
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, hi Fabi, thanks for the question. Great friend of mine. I think, yes, it might be overwhelming. I think we go back to a little bit of the energy and the amount of energy we spend on what we do in the classroom. Keep in mind what you actually want to establish little by little. I think some of the things that are easy to establish are the physical things, not the things that involve attitude. So Go to the toilet before the lesson. These are the materials you're going to use. Leave your bags at a designated area. These are the things that are easy for us to convince students to do. So if you can cover that very quickly in the first weeks, like first or second week, sorry, I think the rest might get easier for you to implement because it won't be that overwhelming anymore. And if you perceive the amount of classroom routine that you're trying to implement as being too overwhelming, I think it's worth reducing the number, covering what you can cover, and then moving on from there. Another thing I think we should be doing more often is consulting with the previous teacher. I mean, we always try to reinvent the wheel in the beginning of every term. And then my question is, why? Why put ourselves through all of the effort again? The previous teacher has just had a whole term in which they worked on establishing classroom routine. Investigate before you start. Talk to the teacher. Make sure you understand exactly the kind of things the teacher did. Decide what you feel comfortable to do and start from there as well. This is something learners already know how to do. They will more quickly remember what's already been established. Better yet, if you can implement in your community, in your teaching community, a set of practices that everybody will sort of standardize, things will get easier for everybody. So in the beginning of every term, you just go back to what everyone else is doing. Every student will supposedly, by default, know how they should act in the beginning of the term. And those new students, they'll catch up. Children usually catch up very easily with the behavior of the group, right? I hope that answered your question.
Yes, of course it did. This also leads to her other question that was, do you have any tips for the very first days of class when we have to teach the procedures to students, but you as a teacher also need to internalize it? So I think it goes back to what you were saying. If we have something institutionalized, perhaps, it's going to be easier for everybody to follow, right?
Definitely. I think having something institutionalized is certainly very helpful. Also because it helps novice teachers. When teachers start teaching young learners, oftentimes they're just thrown into the classroom and they don't know what to do. But if there's some sort of institutionalized practice, it gets a little bit easier to follow suggestions than to come up with something that will work for themselves alone. But in relation to the very first days, I think it's extremely important that you plan the first lessons of your term some days ahead. So don't plan only the first lesson. Plan the first, maybe second and third, so that you can see some sort of common things that will be in these three first lessons. I don't mean to say you have to plan ahead every single week of the term. I mean, it's very difficult to keep up with that. It's very stressful as well. But if you can establish sort of spot, in this lesson, there will be a song. In this other lesson, there will be, I don't know, storytelling. And in this other lesson, there will be, I don't know, a dance that students will do. In all three of these moments, I want to have students in a circle. So this is a procedure worth working on from the very first day. Maybe the make a circle thing will do. This is what I want them to learn in the very first three lessons when it comes to classroom routine. Another thing that might be more doable is keep the routine of what you're going to do in the lesson on the board. So something I like to do is I like to have my own images, and each of the images will mean a certain thing, a certain moment in the lesson. For example, we're going to do storytelling. If we're going to do storytelling, I have a certain image that will show students that that is storytelling moment. And just so you know, I can't find any of the images right now, but let's say you want them to do some work on reading, and you want them to do a song moment, and then there's a storytelling. You have to have an image for each of these, because the images will help students recognize what moment of the lesson it is. It's another trigger for their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So story time, they know they should sit in a circle. Book time, they know they have to open books. Circle time, they know they should come and sit on the floor, for example. Images might be very helpful. Decide the images before you implement the classroom routine.
Right. We have more. Hold on.
Go ahead.
Do you think there is a kind of teacher who is cut out to be teaching young learners?
Yes and no. I think, yes, there are teachers who will show to have a sort of a better experience with young learners and who will report to be a lot happier when dealing with children. But I don't think this is necessarily the key factor in being successful as a language, as a young learners teacher. I think that what helps us teach young learners is, of course, experience. But then again, I think this goes for teaching in itself, but also taking the time and making the effort to understand a child's universe. Maybe people who have been dealing with children for a while because they have young cousins or maybe even a baby at home, they'll find it easier because they can recognize the patterns more easily. Maybe that's the case. But I don't think this is exactly what makes them cut out to be a young learners teachers. And in fact, I think one of the misconceptions that we have sometimes, the idea that in order to teach young learners or even teach itself is we need to have a gift. And I don't think so. I believe in preparation. I believe in development. So you're not born a young learners teacher, but you become one. And just as much as you become any other profession, you name it, you're not born a doctor, but you become a doctor. So you become a young learners teacher. And I think, but then this is my vision as a teacher trainer and a person who never gives up on any coachee or any mentee. I think this is something we should bear in mind, that it's not impossible as long as you're willing to understand how children's minds work and how they learn.
True. I agree 100%. The last one. As a teacher trainer, what is your biggest challenge to show the C.R.A.V.E acronym to novice teachers who are starting the young learners and teens classroom?
I think it's overwhelming for trainees to start teaching young learners if they haven't had any experience with it. Because I think we have a certain vision of what children are like and how they should behave. And we sort of live in this ideal world in which children will not cry and children will behave as we tell them to behave. And I think this is one of the greatest challenges as a teacher, to break through these beliefs that we sometimes have in relation to children. And then after breaking through the beliefs, we go and get to the moments of developing actions that actually are more personalized of the teacher themselves, because if they believe that, I don't know, children have to obey whatever I tell them to do, this is a belief that they have. We got to work with that first, because whatever they'll do in their classroom will be based on that belief. And if they believe that children will do whatever they tell them to do, then the teacher will have a lot of trouble, because they'll not live up to these expectations. And I think this is where it gets hard for a teacher trainer, because teachers get frustrated. They tried to do something and it didn't work, and they'll try something else and it won't work again. And until the moment in which they get the hang of it and they understand what is actually happening there, it's a lot of frustration that they have to face and a lot of challenges. And bearing with them and keep motivating them all the time and telling them, look, it will get better. don't give up on yourself. And I think this is the hardest part.
That's it. Thank you very, very much, Juan, for allowing us to get to know you a little more. That was very nice. I loved your webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. And just a reminder for everyone, I'm going to show the link for the certificates. That's going to be here. So the link for the certificates are going to be open for 30 minutes. Okay, the form will be open for 4:30. From now to 9:30 to go to bit.ly BrELT TYLT Week 2018 certificate, right? So I'll just leave it for a little so you have time to copy anything you would need from the link. Let me go back to, can you see me?
No.
All right, so no, it's all right. I can just speak then. Okay, so thank you again, Juan. And any comments, any thoughts, any last comments you have?
I actually appreciate very much the opportunity you've given me. I think it's always nice to have a space to share what we've been doing and to hopefully shed some light on things that are hard for our peers out there. And I'll be looking forward for the rest of the webinars. I'm actually trying to attend as many as I can. And thanks again for the invitation. Thanks for letting me participate. You're doing a great job out there with the BrELT community and everything. And congrats on the job you're doing.
Thank you a lot on behalf of all of us.
Barbara?
Thank you again. Well, that's it. I would just like to point out that tomorrow at 9 p.m., that's Brasilia time, we're having C.R.A.V.E talking about involving head and heart to foster global citizenship in primary school pupils. So we're also looking forward to having C.R.A.V.E with us. And that's it. Thank you very much for you that have watched this webinar today. Thank you, C.R.A.V.E. Thank you, Juan, as well. Bri, see you.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you and see you all. And thank you again, Juan. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye
everyone.
everyone. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.